The Victus is HP's budget-friendly gaming laptop, but a cheaper laptop means corners have to be cut somewhere. So let's find out what's good and what's bad in this review, starting with the build quality. The Victus has an all-grey plastic build, which I think looks nice and clean. There's no flashy RGB lighting, just the lid logo, which has a reflective mirror finish. Overall build quality is alright for a cheaper gaming laptop. The plastic definitely flexes without too much force, but it doesn't feel too bad when using the laptop normally. The lid was the worst offender. I haven't seen a lid bend this much in a long time. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem as you don't sit there twisting the lid, but the screen has more wobble to it than others if you bump it, though it's not too bad while typing. There's an indent on the front which makes it easy to get your finger in and open. Stressing the hinges flexes the chassis a little, so not sure how that'll last long term. It does a good job of hiding fingerprints, and they're easy to clean with a microfiber cloth. The Victus isn't too big as far as 16-inch gaming laptops go, and still feels quite portable. It's not thin, but it's not a chunky boy either. Just an average-sized 16-inch laptop, and similar in thickness compared to other laptops I'd consider to be its competition. The laptop by itself weighs around 5.2 pounds or 2.4 kilos, increasing to 6.6 pounds or 3 kilos with the 200-watt charger included. It's very similar in weight compared to the last Victus I reviewed a couple of years back, despite that having a larger 16-inch screen. And like the thickness, it's a fairly middle-of-the-pack result. Not heavy and still easily portable. That doesn't change much with the charger included, as the power brick isn't massive. Though interestingly, it's a higher wattage brick compared to those other competing products. So we'll have to see if the extra power results in better performance later. The configuration I bought has Nvidia's RTX 5060 laptop graphics, an older i7 processor from early 2023, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 144Hz screen. But there are different specs available. You can check out options with the link below the video. And if the Victus has a good sale, we'll share it on our gaminglaptop.deals website so you can save money. The keyboard has one zone of RGB backlighting, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. You can't change its brightness. The F4 shortcut only lets you turn it on and off. You can adjust the color through the lighting tab of the included Omen Gaming Hub software. You can sort of use the intensity slider to lower the brightness, but moving that more towards white just makes the keys appear white rather than making your chosen color brighter. I actually liked typing on the keyboard, which isn't a given with budget laptops. The key presses have a nice tactile, clicky feel. It does flex a bit while typing, but I didn't really notice it unless I'm watching it happen. Smaller arrow keys will always annoy me, and although the power button is right next to delete and backspace, an accidental press doesn't do anything. You have to hold it for slightly longer to make it go to sleep. The touchpad also feels nice to use. It's smooth, responsive, and has a nice click. Though, like the keyboard, pressing the top of the touchpad does flex a little. Port selection only contains the basics, but I would have preferred if the left and right sides were swapped, so cables are less likely to get in the way, though the ports are at least all up the back and out of the way. You can boost FPS in games by connecting a monitor to the HDMI port, but the Type-C port can't be used for VR, and these can't be changed as there's no muck switch. Getting inside requires removing 7 Phillips head screws, all the same length. It was easy to open with pry tools. I'll leave a link to these ones I use below. Once inside, we've got the battery down the front, 2 memory slots on the far left, 2 M.2 storage slots in the middle, and the Wi-Fi 6 card to the right of those. Wi-Fi speed was lower compared to most other laptops tested, pretty much the same as Lenovo's lock, while Gigabyte's same class A16 came with Intel's superior Wi-Fi. Speeds from the the installed 512GB SSD were fine, and I confirmed both M.2 slots fit drives with chips on both sides. You just might have to remove the pre-applied thermal pad for more room. My Victus came with one stick of memory installed. Unlike older DDR4 memory, this still technically runs in dual channel, so we don't gain as much performance by adding a second stick. And this way, upgrading RAM is easier, as you only need to buy an extra stick, rather than completely replacing the two the laptop would have come with. The RAM stick was DDR5 5600, but it runs at 5200, as that's a limit of the i7-13620H processor. The Victus gets a good upgrade score, as we can change both RAM slots, two M.2 slots, and Wi-Fi card. It's a whole point ahead of the Victus 16 from a couple of years ago, as that only had one M.2 slot, despite being a bigger laptop. The speakers are underneath towards the front on both sides, and they actually sound pretty decent for a budget gaming laptop. They're clear with a little bass and almost no wrist rest vibration. I've heard worse from more expensive laptops. The Latencymon results were bad in our 5-minute idle test. The Victus is powered by a 70-watt-hour battery. You can manually enable eco mode or set it to automatically enable when you unplug the charger. This automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60 Hz when you unplug the charger to save power, and it goes back up to 144 Hz when you plug back in. I'm not sure if it's a bug, but if you enable eco mode manually with the charger connected, it still lowers the refresh rate to 60 Hz. Battery life was decent when compared against competing laptops, lasting for just over 7 hours in our YouTube video playback test, and almost 2 hours with a game running. Gigabyte's A16 with the same CPU and GPU lasted a fair bit longer, though it does have a 9% higher battery capacity. It lost 33% of its battery charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Here's how much power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison. It's one of the worst results relative to all laptops tested, so you might be better off hibernating instead of sleeping if you're not going to use it for a few hours. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a cooler with a couple of shared heat pipes, and with this design, the CPU on the far left is always going to warm up the GPU. Air comes into the fans through these holes on the bottom and gets exhausted out the back, so no hot air blowing on your mouse hand with the Victus. HP's Omen Gaming Hub software lets us change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are quiet, eco, default, and performance. You can swap the fan between auto and max speed in all modes except eco, but that's it. There aren't any further customizations. You can also use the Function plus P shortcut to swap between the different performance modes. Quick rant on the Gaming Hub software. There's so much random junk in here, it feels like bloatware, and it can be slow to load. The internal temperatures are cool at idle, but the fans were always running. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case full load scenario. But these are all relatively cool too. Only quiet mode was notably warmer, and that's because, as per its name, it keeps the fans quieter, so higher temperatures are the compromise. Running with the lid closed was only 3 to 5 degrees warmer, so no problem if you want to dock the laptop. Using a stand didn't make any difference compared to just running the laptop on my desk. But the cooling pad I test with, linked below, was able to lower temperatures further. The CPU maxes out at 25 watts in all modes, at least with the GPU under load too. The GPU runs around 80 watts in its best performance mode, and this matches what the NVIDIA control panel lists for its max dynamic boost. So this is not a full-powered 5060 laptop, as those can go up to 115 watts. Clock speeds don't really change too much in performance mode, as there's no thermal throttling happening, and this is why the cooling pad doesn't really improve performance. Now, I'm no thermal engineer or anything, but I think HP made a bad choice with the Victus. Victus. With the CPU and GPU loaded up at the same time, the 5060 maxes out at 80 watts, while the CPU maxes out at 25 watts. But then Gigabyte's similarly priced A16 with the same CPU and GPU as the Victus runs its CPU at 20 watts and GPU at 80 watts. So you're telling me that the Victus has a 50 watt higher charger, 33% more power capacity, and all it gets is 5 extra watts on the processor? That doesn't make sense to me. At a minimum, the way I see it, the Victus should have been allowed to run its 5060 graphics up to 100 watts, especially with the cool temperatures that we've seen. Or if they don't want to go that route, then sell the Victus with a smaller charger and reduce the total weight. Based on my power scaling testing, a 5060 at 100 watts performs 7% better than a 5060 at 80 watts. So it just feels like HP has left performance on the table here. Maybe they don't want to step on their higher tier Omen series, I can only guess. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use. I've got Cyberpunk 2077 at ultra settings, running it native in purple, and DLSS upscaling on quality in red to boost performance. There's not really much of a performance difference between all of the modes. Yeah, the highest performance mode is best, but we're talking about less than 6 FPS, or just 8% more FPS compared to the lowest eco mode. And forget about gaming on Type-C power with the Victus. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload, like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle, but not much, maxing out at just 45 watts in default and performance modes. This is only the third laptop with Intel's i7-13620H we've tested, but it's also the worst performing one in terms of multi-core performance. Gigabyte's A16 scores 19% higher, as it's able to run its processor up to 70 watts in this test. At least performance doesn't lower much if we unplug the charger and run on battery power. It's now a fair bit better compared to those other two laptops with the same processor, so a good result. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30°C range on the keyboard at idle, and the Victus was significantly warmer than this in its middle hotspot, though that only felt a little warm. The rest was cool. It gets warmer with the stress test running. The rest and WASD area still feels cold, and the middle hotspot is definitely warmer, but not uncomfortable. Quiet mode is significantly warmer as the fans are running slower and quieter. The WASD area still feels cool, but the middle is approaching uncomfortable. It's not as bad as my thermal camera would lead you to believe, as the hottest points are between the keys, and you can't touch there. Default mode was a fair bit cooler, as the fans get louder to compensate for the extra power. The highest performance mode wasn't too different. The rest and WASD are still cool, and the middle just feels a little warm. Not too bad. The keyboard hotspot is on the warmer side, but again, don't forget, this is literally just the center of the keyboard in between the keys. The left of the hotspot was cool, while the right side was just a little warm, so I don't think it's a concern. But how loud do the fans get? Let's find out. The fans were always audible when idling in eco mode, but you could change that in BIOS. Fan noise gets louder in the higher modes, as expected, but even in the highest performance mode, it's significantly quieter compared to a lot of other laptops that we've tested. This would be one advantage of the Victus not running with higher CPU and GPU power limits. It doesn't need noisy fans to keep things cool. That said, Gigabyte's A16 had a perceived fan noise 44% louder than the Victus. But as discussed earlier, the Victus still uses more power. Given that performance mode is already on the quieter side, I'd just stick with that for gaming to get the best FPS possible. Of course, with that said, any of the lower modes could be used to run the laptop even quieter. And as we saw, they all still offered good performance with the game running. So you can still get good performance with a far quieter laptop. And that's probably for the best, as the laptop vibrates a bit when the fans are maxed out. As for the screen, well, that's one of the places where budget gaming laptops always suffer. Color gamut isn't quite as bad compared to Gigabyte's A16, but it's not far off. The colors look washed out. The contrast is at least decent, but that's the only positive. Screen brightness is just above 300 nits, which is the minimum I think is acceptable, even from a cheaper laptop. And it was exactly the same as the last Victus we tested a couple of years ago, though that had a slightly larger screen. Brightness from the Victus was similar to a number of other laptops I'd say are in the same sort of tier. Not amazing, but fine. Backlight bleed was fine, but this will vary between each panel. Screen response time is slow and not great for competitive, fast-paced games. Ideally for a 144Hz screen, we want transitions to occur within the 6.94 millisecond refresh window, but the average is closer to 17 milliseconds. We're close to the point where even moving stuff around in windows can look a bit blurry. You know it's rough when even the older Victus with slower 60Hz refresh rate had a faster response time. Still, the Victus was faster than this year's Lenovo Lock, Gigabyte's A16, and Alienware's Aurora, so maybe I can't complain too much. And that said, people who own this laptop rate the display at 4.5 out of 5, so maybe I've just been spoiled after testing more expensive laptops. A slower screen contributes to a slower total system latency, which is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire shows up on screen in Counter-Strike 2. But again, it's still faster or close compared to many laptops that I'd say are competition for the Victus. The Victus doesn't have a mux switch at all, so there's no advanced Optimus either. This means frames from a game have to go from the Nvidia GPU through the Intel integrated graphics and then to the screen, which can reduce performance a bit in esports titles. It does at least have adaptive sync though, so no screen tearing as long as your frame rate is above 60. The camera is only 720p, so you can kind of make out the pixels that make out my face. There's no IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock, and this is what it sounds like while typing on the keyboard. Alright, let's see what HP's budget-friendly Victus can do in games. We've tested it with these settings. Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p ultra settings plays well enough, but Lenovo's cheaper Lock with lower-tier RTX 5050 graphics was slightly ahead. The Victus is in the same boat as Gigabyte's A16 next to it. They've both got lower-powered 5060 GPUs, so they don't perform as well as the other full-powered versions we've tested. This continues at 1440p. We've got all our 80W 5060 laptops clustered together, while the best 5060 tested so far was 20% faster. So just goes to show how much of a role power limit plays in performance. Don't forget that the Victus has a 200W charger. The Aurora's is 118 watts, while the A16's is just 150 watts. So it doesn't look like the Victus is making the most of its bigger charger. It's a similar deal in Alan Wake 2 at 1080p. The lower powered 5060s are all running just under 60 FPS. Definitely usable given we're running at max settings and we're not even using DLSS. And at least the Victus is ahead of the lower tier 5050 in the Lock in this game. 1440p doesn't change much, apart from the frame rate getting worse. It's probably for the best that the Victus only has a 1080p screen, though you could of course lower the settings and use DLSS to boost FPS. Black Myth Wukong was running close to 60 FPS at 1080p high settings, and again it is ahead of the 5050 Lock, but it's really not much of a difference, especially considering the 5050 is cheaper. At 1440p, the lower powered 5060 in the Victus is still basically matching the 4060 from last gen in Asus's TUF, as that one has a higher power limit. Kind of makes the 5060 feel a bit pointless compared to last gen in this case, unless you really want multi-frame generation. Results weren't too different with ray tracing and upscaling enabled. RT is more intensive, but combining DLSS can result in higher FPS compared to not using RT or DLSS. And of course, you could skip tracing those rays if you just want more FPS with DLSS. The 5060's 8GB of VRAM isn't as much of a concern here with that 1080p screen, but it can still be a limit in some games depending on the settings you use. But at this sort sort of price range, unfortunately, there's not really much you can do about it, as currently, the only way of getting more VRAM is to spend more on a 5070 Ti or 4080 laptop, and those are way more expensive. Here are the 3D Mark results. Content creator performance was poor compared to others due to the lower specs, and combined with the low quality screen, I'd look elsewhere for this sort of work. There's not much available through the BIOS. A few extra customization options compared to some other laptops, but not much of particular interest. Linux support was excellent. Everything I tested worked without any problems. The Victus is generally one of the cheaper gaming laptops you can buy, but prices will always change over time, so check the links below for updates. If the Victus has a good sale, you'll find it on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that daily to share the best deals, so make sure you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. We're starting to get pretty close to Black Friday, so maybe consider even bookmarking the site, and sign up to our email deal alert newsletter so you don't miss anything. Right now in mid-October, the Victus is on sale for $950 at Walmart, or $100 more at Best Buy, which only gets you double the SSD space, which isn't worth it. This makes the Victus one of the cheapest RTX 50 gaming laptops we've tested so far. Gigabyte's A16 with the same specs has only dropped to $1,050 so far, while Lenovo's lock has gone all the way down to $800. Ideally, I'd like to see the Victus below $900, considering for the same price, you can get Lenovo's vastly superior Legion 5. Now this is what a good sale should look like. But is the Victus even worth buying if the price is right? Let's summarize the good and the bad to find out. Starting with the good, the Victus runs its internals cool, its fans are quieter compared to most others, it's got good upgrade options, decent battery life, we found the touchpad and keyboard nice to use, and the plastic build doesn't feel terrible, but there is some flex, which is to be expected with all plastic laptops. The speakers aren't bad, and Linux support is great. As for the bad, the lower powered 5060 doesn't perform as well as higher powered options, and I don't understand why HP power limited it so much when it's got a 200 watt charger and good thermals. There's no muck switch, the camera is low quality, it loses more power while asleep, it comes with slower Wi-Fi than most others, and the screen's colors and response time aren't very good. Bottom line, I don't think the Victus is too bad as long as it's one of the cheapest options. Apart from the newer RTX 50 series GPU, the Victus hasn't really changed. I'm gonna compare it against other laptops like Gigabyte's A16 and Lenovo's lock in an upcoming budget 5060 comparison video, so get subscribed for that one. Right now, I'm leaning more towards the lock being the better choice. But until that comparison is out, you can find out all the details on the lock over here next. It's still a budget gaming laptop, so there are still going to be compromises. It just comes down to what those compromises are, and if they're things that you can deal with. So I'll see you over in that one to find out.